Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 6 of Operation Gold Strike. This is the finale. We wrap it up now. In the last episode, we had landed our ore carrier on Minmus, and we were about to take off again. But before we go back to that, let's go back in time a little bit, because I didn't get to show you some of the failures associated with lifting off that ore carrier. Sometimes the mistakes were quite simple, like in this early testing I hadn't realized I put the CPU on backward, and so when I thought I was heading out into the ocean, I was actually heading inland, so going the wrong way. All I did was revert and start over again, and the second time I went the correct direction. That's about as innocent as the mistakes go. Then they get worse, like this one here. A little bit of instability turned this attempted launch into a staging test. Oh no, Mayday, Mayday! Hit the spacebar a lot. That'll surely solve all our problems. And then due to too much engine gimbal and an unstable payload, we have the good old-fashioned flip out. Oh, no, gone. But I didn't limit my mistakes to just launching. How about the arrival at Minmus? How about a bad landing? I hadn't worked out the balance of the engines yet. I had to actually go back to the VAB on this one and redo the engines to have one set for landing and one set for liftoff later. Oh, look at that debris cloud. Oh, yes. Nice. This reminds me of another old episode of mine where debris was raining down on Minmus. In this other landing, I was coming down on the slope, and I thought that maybe I could land on it anyway and roll down it, but yeah, things didn't exactly go to plan on that. Not to mention I was landing a kilometer away. Oh yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. I totally stuck that landing. And then there's this one where I thought it would actually be cool to come in with some forward velocity and land on the wheels rolling, but I forgot to turn off the brakes. Even with a good landing, there was sometimes some bad driving. If I didn't remember to turn off my gyro, then I occasionally would flip the rover. So remember, kids, turn off your gyroscopes. Want to see some gyroscope fun? Oh yeah, I drove around for probably a good 5 minutes before I remembered to turn off my gyros. Oh, and then there's this one. I'm trying to dock here. The gyroscopes are still on, and I'm trying to get the hang of using the Navy Fish docking alignment indicator while on the ground. Oh, good times. And finally, for my first attempt at a liftoff. This is back before I had put enough delta V on there to actually lift off with the ore. Remember how I talked in the other episode about remember to do that? Well, I didn't the first time. I knew immediately that I wasn't going to have enough, but I decided to go with it anyway because why not? Explosions are fun. But now we return to the present. This is where we had left off in the last episode. We had undocked our rover and then waited for the space station to start coming overhead. Now, one thing I didn't mention last time, I activated an extra set of engines right there. When we originally landed, we landed on 4 engines, and I have those 4 on a special action group, and then there's 2 extra engines that are on a different action group that I activated before the liftoff to not only provide extra thrust to carry the heavy ore, but also to keep the whole thing in balance. When I come down and I'm landing with it and it's empty, it has a certain balance characteristic. The center of mass is in one spot, and then when it's fully loaded with ore, the balance is in a totally different location. The center of mass shifts quite a bit, so those extra engines allow me to keep that balanced between both the liftoff and the landing. Now, as you can see, we're lifting off here with our ground base, not exactly underneath the space station, but given that it's Minmus, that barely matters at all. We'll just go until we can get our close approaches here to match up over on that orbit somewhere further along, and then partway up we'll make an adjustment to refine that and get these two in closer proximity to make the inclination change and all that good stuff that's going to get us all lined up, and bring this rover in for a docking to transfer the ore over to the space station and really do the refining, because that's what we're here for. There's our station now. I wasn't in a big hurry to get these two lined up because we're sort of over here in the dark side, even though I have the ambient light mod giving us some extra light here to see by. I'd still rather complete the docking in the sunlight. Just looks better over there. So yeah, not in too much of a hurry. I was just letting it go until we can get over to the sun. Oh, hey, I just remembered. Guess what came out today? Real Solar System for version 102. So now I should be able to get back to doing some Alexandria and Enterprise episodes. However, after this finale of Operation Goldstrike, I do still need to finish off Project Odyssey first. That one's still back on version 0.25. Hopefully I'll have enough time now to do episode 46. This miniseries has put me ahead by about 5 weeks. Although, episode 46 is going to take a while to make, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, here we are about to dock up, and once we do that, we can start doing the ore transfer, shifting it over from our rover rocket up into the space station and getting ready to do the conversion. There's 3 tanks of ore on the rover, 3 tanks available for us to store it up on the station. We'll use all of them, transfer it all over there. Then by right-clicking on the refinery, there's multiple options, but I'm going to take the one that converts into liquid fuel and oxidizer at the same time so we can try and fill up that orange tank. Each ore container is 1,500, and since we can double that when we convert it into fuel, that ought to give us a total of 9,000. An orange tank is only 6,400, so we'll have plenty left over to put into all the extra tanks as well. Now I need to line up here with the sun to make sure that we have enough power to power that refinery. You can see it down here chugging along, chug chug chug. Following that, I'll use my fuel balancer here to force the fuel out of the orange tank and into every other tank in the station and all the ships. Now the rover is ready to undock and head back to the surface for a second load someday in the future. If you're not using the TAC fuel balancer, then you're going to have a lot of clicking in your future, but one by one you could do it. Go through the station, find all the fuel tanks, and transfer out the fuel a little here and a little there. I'm not going to say it won't be tedious, but you could do it. Alright, the rover is refueled, we have undocked, we've waited until we're sort of coming over the landing site here. I'll have to do an inclination change to reach the landing site for real, but I'll set that maneuver up right now. Until we do this undocking and return back to the surface, we can't really know that this is going to work. We can't prove that this whole system is a closed cycle. So that's what I'll do now. After this landing, we will know that we can head down to the surface because we'll have done that right now from the station down to the ground, and we already did ground up to station, so after that, we'll just assume that this goes back and forth as many times as necessary to keep all the ships in our fleet fueled up. Before we get back to this though, we still haven't looked at this craft in the VAB, so let's take a look at this one now. 8 solid boosters here surrounding a 3.75 meter central core stage using that new Mammoth engine where I modified the sound effects and the flames coming out of it to make them look cooler. Once again, using different thrust limiters on the different stages here. 68% on this SRB, where this one is 100% on that SRB, and then the middle core is another 68.5%, ensuring that these thrust to weight ratios over here stay within nominal ranges. Notice at liftoff, we start out at 1.53. By the time we decouple the first boosters, we're at 278. But then for the second stage, we're only going to get up to 2.3 and then 2.61. So at max throttle, these will all stay very reasonable, and I'll never need to throttle back in order to maintain stability or not go into too high G-forces. Moving our way up to here, you can see that this one is going to go from 1.4 to 2.77. I used my little trick with the beams on there to get my RCS down lower, and then we'll work our way up here to where we can see we've got those rails on the side again, like on our other launches, to maintain a little extra stability on the payload. And we'll pull that off, and now we'll look at the rover itself. Before we start dissecting it, let's take a look at the action groups. You can see that number 1 activates our solar panels, 2 is the antenna here, and then there's a dish in the back right there. 3 is one of the toggles for 4 of the engines. Remember I said there are 6 engines, 4 of them are for landing, and all 6 are used for liftoff. You can see them right here, here, and here, and then another set on the other side. So here's number 4 action group for 2 of the engines, the ones in the back right there. And 5 is to undock this back node over here, and that's it. There is no 6. So now we'll go back into here and take a look at these different engines. So the landing engines, this one has been thrust limited to 79, while the middle one is 100%. That way, on that balance, as soon as I disable this engine here, let's remember that that's at 12. We'll pull that down and get the other one on the other side as well. There we go. So that generates this center of thrust relative to the center of mass. Pretty much going about through the center of it, and therefore very stable. So now if we reactivate these engines back to their 12 thrust each, then all we have to do is throw some ore into the different tanks like this, and this, and this. And because we will have been down on the ground, that means we'll have used up some fuel already for our landing. So if we take fuel out of here, we get a center of thrust that goes up through the new center of mass. Now if you saw, when I was pulling the fuel out of these tanks a moment ago, they're only filled halfway, and that's because they sink halfway down into the ore carriers here down below. So I figured if only half of them are up outside of these ore holders, then I should only fill them halfway with fuel. That makes it a bit more realistic, as if that section of the tanks didn't exist. So all around the outside of it, obviously there's going to be more lights for docking and just lights for seeing, more lights for docking. We have 2 CPUs, we have this one here for driving around, and we have this one here for landing, and I just toggle between them as necessary. At various points around here, of course there's going to be RCS engines, which I used this just to balance it out. The balance was set up for the loaded with ore mode, because that's where I'm going to be docking with the station, and that's the mode where the RCS balance will be important. Then down here we have our disabled battery just in case we run out of power, and other than that it's just the wheels. I'll flip it on its side so we can see what those look like. All right, there we go. So I used some regular girders, one here, here, and here, and then I put these other girders attached to those, and then the wheels attached to the girders, which created a little chassis for it that runs all down the middle here and giving me enough space to put the wheels on the different points. Large gyroscope in the back here gives us plenty of stability, but remember that's the one you turn off once you switch into the ground mode using the CPU right here. And that's pretty much it. Alright, let's go back to Min-Miss. Now I've got the hang of landing this. No joke, this was flawless. We came in right over the base. Very few orbital maneuvers to make sure we're coming down in the spot we wanted. Didn't land on the hill and roll down it or anything like that. Didn't hit the ground too hard. Didn't forget to turn on or off anything. It was beautiful. Look how gently we're touching down, like a feather, like a leaf in the wind. And then as we make our way over to the base after that little bit of practice from previously when we landed the first time, I now know how to orient myself with the docking alignment indicator on the ground. When you're in orbit, you want to line up the orange circle in the center, and then use RCS to move the green bars in on the center as well. But here when you're on the ground, you want to line up the green bars, the green cross first, and then orient the orange circle on top of the green cross. It's backward. So now as the ore fills back up, all of this is for naught if we don't have something to launch that we can refuel. So that's right, Kerbonauts, I made an airplane. A fully functional, single stage to orbit space plane that can make its way all the way to Min-Miss. Actually, I think I could go to Duna with this. And while that introduction to my space plane was quite glorious if I say so myself, it wasn't always that easy. Let's take a look at the road to where we are now. So, a disclaimer, I know next to nothing about making planes in KSP. There are some people out there who are absolute plane geniuses. I am more of a rocketry and interplanetary genius when it comes to planes and space planes. Absolute novice. So when I bring up aerodynamic forces indicators like these, I'm just pretending I know what the hell I'm looking at. I have no idea what all those lines are, what the colors mean, or if any of them are pointing in the wrong direction, or if they're the wrong length. And if that were the case, what would I possibly do to fix any of them? No clue. All that said, I threw a bunch of parts on something that looked a bit like a plane to me from images that I've seen on Reddit about other people making space planes, and they look somewhat like this, and they say they can make it to orbit, so I threw them all together in this way, and sure enough, it was pretty stable and got to orbit in only like 3 or 4 tries. And some of those initial tries are really just me learning how to fly these stupid things. Like this one. Notice how the front wheel is already off the ground? Yeah, needed to work on the balance of that, but nonetheless I started it up anyway to see what would happen. Maybe I could force the nose down before we took off. And I was right. However, things were a little bit more unstable than I might have liked. Oh yeah. Nailed it! Any landing you can walk away from. After that instability was fixed, we went out again, but you notice all of the heat indicators. I forgot to start the recorder for this one, but right before what you're looking at here, several bits of the ship had exploded due to overheating, so I was still learning how to go through the atmosphere with a space plane as well. You can see here some of the things that exploded on it. What this ended up meaning is I didn't have enough delta V to make it high enough. Some of my air intakes had exploded. And without those jet engines, just trying to get to orbit on that nuclear engine, it wasn't enough, and that led us to this. I came close to recovering it once or twice. I thought that if I could make it over to that land mass right in front of us and land on that rather than ditching in the ocean. But even though I could get it under control for a little while, it would flip out again, and then I'd get it in control for a bit, and then it would flip out again, and ultimately we ended up ditching in the ocean. Jebediah doesn't seem to mind the crashing one bit, though. Our spaceplane is now on the way to Minmus, on the way to the space station, although we'll be skipping past most of the trip, because a trip to Minmus is pretty much a trip to Minmus, and we've had a few of those already in this series. The only thing unique about this one is I am trying to intercept the space station while on a hyperbolic orbit passing by Minmus. So that's why I tried to get my orbit to match up with that one there, the one of the station, and then we'll just capture right as we go by there, making the inclination change to match up our orbit with that one at the same time that we're doing a retro burn to match the orbits. Once we get this spaceplane docked up to the station and transfer over fuel, if the tanks on this were completely full, we could go anywhere. We could go anywhere in this solar system. We could leave the solar system, probably. We could go to every planet one after the other. With a full tank and a nuclear engine, there are no limits. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the series, Kerbinauts. Remember, all of the craft files are available for download. You can go down into the comments of this video and grab a link that will take you over to them. Keep in mind that occasionally I made changes to the craft files after the videos were made, so everything won't necessarily match up exactly the way that you've seen it, but that just means you're going to be getting the latest craft files. So if I thought of anything after I made the video, a change I needed to make, something to improve it, then you'll be getting those improvements from those new crafts. I will leave you now with a look back at our constructions in the series. Until next time, I will see you later, Kerbinauts.